I've travelled 4,000 miles to be here in America with a broken £10 film camera. Cool. Hello there and welcome to this travel photography film camera vlog special adventure around the American Midwest. I was told by my producer, don't have a producer, it's just my mate Ben, that my challenge for this trip was to document it using a camera that costs less than a roll of film. Fortunately, the price of film has skyrocketed, so I could have brought a brand new Leica if I could afford one, but I've kept things a bit more down to earth. And I was feeling pretty pleased with myself because the camera I'd chosen was not only iconic and beautiful, but an absolute steal. Often seen on eBay for over £100, I found this at a rural camera fair for just £10, which is definitely cheaper than most film. This is the Yashica Electro 35. I've wanted this camera for a while and I wish I could say there's a really important technical reason. Truth is, I just think it's very, very sexy. But now I'm here and had the chance to look at it more closely, there's a few things that are a bit worrying. For example, this cracked little window. At first, I thought it was just a viewfinder and wouldn't really be much of an issue, but now I see it actually goes across the rangefinder focusing window. And that could ruin all my photos if my aging, failing eyes can't see the bits they're meant to see. Secondly, and more terrifying, it turns out these are renowned for having a problem called the pad of death, which can jam the shutter, ruin the shutter speeds, and mess with the electronics. I do like that it's got a little atomic symbol, very 60s.
You know it's radioactive.
What? Radioactive. What? My radioactive camera would be accompanying me around Chicago, Milwaukee and Sheboygan, Wisconsin. But because it was a super last-minute work trip with my video team at Tide, I had no idea what the plan was or when I'd be able to go out and take photos. And that's a real problem when shooting film. With the digital camera, you can boost or reduce your ISO to cater for how dark or light the situation is. But film has a fixed ISO, so you need to make that decision long before you shoot. You need to choose a film to load into the camera that's going to work in the environment you're shooting in. And to make that worse, the last-minute nature of this trip means I had a tough time trying to get hold of some film. A really tough time. I couldn't. I left the UK hoping it would be easier to buy film stateside, but I didn't have much time, so I bought the first thing that I could get my hands on. Cinestill 800T is a motion picture film adapted for stills photography. Its grain, halation and contrast give it a vintage cinematic feel. It's one of the most popular 35mm film stocks, especially these days, with people who like to shoot gas stations and train stations at night. Alright, thank God that massive problem is sorted and I can start taking photos. Should probably take the price tag off. I haven't done anything to this camera since I bought it. I've brought it along as is to see how it works, see what we get for £10 and what might need doing to it. I'm guessing it's going to need light seals for starters, so pretty sure we're going to get some bad light leaks on our photos, but at least... Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. When I bought this camera, the battery was working fine. Before I packed it in my suitcase, it was working fine. But now, when I press the battery test button, apparently it's not working fine. That should light up. Balls. 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 So let's open her up. No. So the problem is, the batteries that used to power this back when they were made aren't made anymore because they contain toxic mercury. So people tend to get creative with the solution. Someone had wrapped modern, safer batteries in tinfoil to recreate the size and power of the originals, which meant I had to hunt down some sort of similar solution, which would have been hard enough back home where I knew where to look. While I try and fix this, let's put in a bit here about the Electro 35. Yes, let's do that. The Electro was the first electronically controlled camera ever made. Released in 1966 by Japanese company Yashica, it was revolutionary at the time, asking the user only to choose an aperture while the camera works out the shutter speed. Maybe that's why they sold more than 8 million. As I've just discovered, the cutting-edge technology was powered by 5.6 volt mercury batteries that were banned in many countries in the 90s, because of their toxic contents and environmental concerns. This is the GSN model that came out in 1973. Versions of this camera made before 1970 wouldn't have been able to take the Cinestill 800 film I'm using because they could only handle film up to ASA 500. This is a great camera for beginners with only the features you really need to help you take photos and a sharp f1.7 lens to let lots of light in. I couldn't find any new batteries, so stuffed the tinfoil back in and thankfully it started working again. So I went out in Milwaukee to try and take some photos. What else could go wrong? It's absolutely hammering it down with rain, hence this attire for when I've come to America for a nice sunny trip. But shooting on Cinestill 800T gives me a bit of a problem. Firstly, the 800 in the Cinestill 800T is the ISO, the 800 ISO, so it's fixed ISO on film, you can't change that. And that means that the 800 is quite bright for a normal average day outside. Not so much today. But that means that most of the film I'm going to shoot on is probably going to be too bright for a camera that's automatic and it chooses the shutter speed for you. Fortunately, I brought some ND filters to cope with that, so that's not too much of a problem. However, the T in 800T stands for tungsten. And that means that the film is balanced for artificial light, not for natural daylight. So if you shoot in natural daylight, it tends to look quite blue. I don't have a solution for that. Or this rain. I'm not going to shoot much in this. Come to America. Be lovely.
I don't know how weather sealed cameras were back in the 60s and 70s, but this doesn't look good. Let's hope the film's okay. On the electronics.
Okay, prepare yourselves for some very underwhelming initial photos from the 35. So I've got lucky, there is a solution for the blueness of the 800T. You'll have to apologise for this lens, it's steaming up and hot and wet and I can't do anything about it. So to combat the blueness we can put in a warming filter. The 85B is the recommended and that's what I have here. See how that changes from blue to orange. Anyway, the iPhone's kind of making a mess of God, this looks disgusting. I'm really sorry. But I'm excited to have this because it means that I can maybe take photos in the daytime if this rain ever stops. What else can go wrong? Oh, that's fucked it. I'm not going to say that. Right, that's cool, Bella. This is by a brand called Adox. This was like $5, so cheap as chips. And I've looked it up and you can get this back in the UK. It's just a tiny bit of plastic. And I've just had this in my pocket next to my leather wallet. And it's got some leather stuck to it. Awesome stuff. Lovely. We shall see how this goes. I've really made a mess of this filter. Look at the state of this. It's not just the rain. It's just got crap all over it. I tried wiping it with a tissue. That was a mistake. I'm in Milwaukee Public Museum and I'm really struggling to get focused because the little bit of broken glass on the viewfinder keeps sliding over, so I have to keep sliding it back before every shot. Really good fun. If it's possible to take worse photos indoors than outdoors in a storm, then here we are. But back in Sheboygan there were some better photos to come out of the Electro. Oh, ignore that one. I went for a walk at sunrise and found a little area where people would go for their morning exercise. Composing shots through the viewfinder can feel like guesswork sometimes, and I'm hoping that explains why I cropped this horizon so tight to the top of the image. Now, fortunately I am a VIP, so I can take you through here to where we were filming the powerboat racing. They had these cool old racing boats, which I thought were worth a shot. The light flaring off the engine looks awesome with that halation from the Cinestill 800. A couple of moments here I snatched behind the scenes. I just had to get this upcoming picture of these really friendly firefighters who were at the event making sure everyone was safe. Then I just found the architecture of this building quite interesting, so I snapped that. Look at the halation on the brighter parts of the structure. Then this sunset, which on film was, well, disappointing, really. Now let's talk about the pad of death. The Electros are quite susceptible to this problem, which, although fixable, can kill them off. It's difficult to explain, but basically some parts that move inside can deteriorate and cause the shutter to stop working, inaccurate shutter speeds, or the warning lamps to play up. When working okay, these cameras usually have quite a loud thunk when winding on the film. So if we wind it and there isn't a loud thunk, then we might have the pad of death. And if this camera has the pad of death, then this whole thing is going to be a complete waste of time. So let's see what we think. Was that a loud thunk? Excuse me, mate. Would you say this was a thunk or a loud thunk? I wouldn't know until I came to getting the film developed. So I did the only thing I could and kept going. So I've been shooting with the 35 and it's a really easy camera to use for a couple of reasons. Firstly, that rangefinder focusing that I was worried about being affected by the smash window, it seems absolutely fine as far as I can tell. And the rangefinder system makes it really simple and fast to focus. As you turn the focus ring, you'll see that part of the image in the center duplicated in orange, like a little orange diamond-shaped ghost layer. You just keep turning the focus left or right until that lines up with the main image. That part is then in focus. The second reason this is easy to use is because of its advanced AI features. This is an aperture priority camera, which means you only have to choose your aperture setting and the camera chooses the shutter speed for you. Picking an aperture is usually a decision based on how much you want to be in focus and how the light is. For example, I tend to shoot landscapes at f11 for more of the scene to be in focus, and portraits are more likely to be closer to f1.7 to blur the background. But if you don't understand any of that, then you don't have to worry because this camera has you covered. And in truth, here's how I tend to work with the 35. I compose my shot, line it up as I want, nail the focus, and then what I do is I wind the aperture all the way to f1.7, which usually kicks on the red overexposure warning light, and turn it the other way until the light goes out. That should give you the fastest shutter speed for the situation, which is going to give you the best chance of stopping blurry photos. There's also a yellow slow exposure warning light that comes on at the other extreme when the camera will shoot at 1/30th of a second or slower. And that means you're going to have to either be solid as a rock when pressing the shutter or put it on a tripod if you can't change the aperture to a smaller number to let more light in. As with anything, it might sound more complicated than it is, but once you do it yourself a couple of times, then shooting with a 35 is really simple. Then a storm put an end to the evening, and the next day we were off to Chicago. So we're going to the baseball game, Chicago White Sox versus the New York Yankees. How you feeling?
Apparently this is kind of a big deal. Thought we'll immerse ourselves in the local or the national culture.
Baseball.
Be very British.
And we know nothing about baseball.
It smells a lot of weed.
That is very strong weed. I'm walking back to the car because they won't allow in the camera case from my film camera. I can take in the film camera. I can't take in the case for the film camera. There we go. This baseball game was one of the most memorable moments of my life. I never understood baseball, didn't really get it, but while I was there and chatting to all the people that we made friends with, suddenly it all just made sense as a social event as much as a sport. And being there with the Electro 35 was a great way to capture these moments. And despite some setbacks and some quirks, I'm really thrilled with how these pictures came out. I'm really thrilled with how fun it was to use this camera. It is a sexy camera. It is great at taking photos, and I'm pleased to have had it with me for this journey. Don't forget to like and subscribe, etc.